Hey, today we're gonna make boxes. We're gonna make little clay boxes, hand building, the most beginner friendly basic version ever. I'm gonna use the minimal amount of tools. You can follow along if you like with the video. I also have templates that I put up on my Etsy shop if you want to buy the templates so you can make the exact same thing that I'm making, but you don't need to do that. You can just follow this instructional video and I'll show you how to make the box step by step. You really just need a few tools. Nothing super specific. This is super basic. You could do it on your dining room table if you want. Okay, starting off with our tools, we've got a rolling pin. We've got these two wooden guides that are about 1/4 inch thick for rolling out our slabs. Also have these little round ones. They're just dowels. You can get them at Home Depot. They're super cheap and super easy to use and cut. I've got my clay. I'm using white stoneware, but you're welcome to use whatever clay you're comfy hand building with. We've got 2 sponges. This is just a cheapo 50-cent one. This is the Mud Tools finishing sponge if you're into that, but these are like $10, so you don't have to have that if you don't want it. We've also got a metal rib tool. These come in most basic hand building sets, so you can get these for like really easy, really cheap. And then I also have the Mud Tools rubber rib tool that's super flexible and bendy. I love this thing. I use it all the time for every single piece that I ever make. I've got a wire cutter. You can also literally just cut the clay, rip the clay off with your hands. You don't even have to cut it. It's not specific. Scissors for cutting the template. We've got a ruler for keeping our edges straight. I've got a paintbrush that I'm going to use to smooth out inside lines in the box. And I also have an X-Acto knife. You don't need an X-Acto knife. You can use a pin tool. Super easy. You don't have to use an X-Acto knife. Or you could even use one of these little pointy knife dudes. Anything really. Just something to cut the lines. We're also gonna need a little cup of water, which I've got here. I roll my pieces out on this board, MDF board, so that way the clay doesn't stick to my tabletop, but you can use a piece of canvas. You can use newspaper. You can roll it out directly on the table if you have a porous wood surface. That's the basics of the stuff that we're gonna need. If you're doing this at home, you're gonna need access to a kiln of some kind, whether that's like a public use one, maybe you have one, maybe your friend has one, maybe you have a local ceramic studio that'll let you use theirs. All of those work great. We're gonna start out by cutting out our template. I just used normal computer paper for this. I went to the library and used the library's printer, so computer paper works just fine. Have watercolor paper, maybe even cardboard, something that's a little bit more sturdy that'll last longer. If you want to make multiple of these, that'll work best. This paper is pretty much a one-time use thing, so if you want it to last longer, use a nicer material. But I'm gonna go ahead and cut these out. Each individual piece is labeled with what it is, so that way you can keep track of the things as you cut them out. If you want to cut out the center of the flower, you can. I'm just going to use a needle tool later to just kind of like make an imprint and then cut from there. So if you don't like this shape, feel free to make a different shape, you know? Okay, we've got all of our pieces cut out, and now I'm going to roll out my slab. Now, as you're rolling your slab out, you want to flip it every few passes so that it stops sticking to the table and you can get a more even wall all the way through. I also always go back to the center of my slab and roll from there. So I go to the center and pull back, the center, go. Now that I've got my slab rolled out, I'm going to take my rib tool and just really gently slide it across the surface. like to go in with the rubber one and just compress the clay. Compressing the clay like this helps the clay retain its shape when it goes in the firing, because clay has a memory. If you start to curve the slab and pick it up and like start to manipulate it a lot before it's too dry, it'll curve and warp when it goes into the kiln. So you try not to move your slabs around too much as you're working. Okay, that's pretty good. If you want to add texture to your slab, now is the perfect opportunity to do that. I'm gonna leave mine nice and smooth. If you want to add like fingerprints, you can take like any of your tools and kind of push shapes into the surface. But I'm just gonna leave this nice and smooth. Now that we have our slab nice and smooth and rolled out, I'm gonna place my templates pieces. Leave a little space in between these because your needle tool is gonna need a little bit of space to wiggle. Okay, and then I press them down into the clay so they kind of stick. And then I'm gonna grab my knife tool and we're gonna cut out these shapes. The paper is already kind of disintegrating, so we're gonna do it kind of quickly. I like to grab a ruler, push it against the edge of the paper so that way I can make sure I get a straight line. And I'm holding my tool straight up and down, not at an angle when I do the long edges. Okay, and then I'm going to take a pin tool to do the round ones because it'll be easier for me to see. And then, like I said, I'm gonna kind of just do some little dots. Not poking through the paper, but just kind of poking it enough so when I take the paper off, I'll be able to see through that. Now we're gonna peel all the paper off. Now we're gonna put all of these aside and put them in front of a fan so they dry a little bit before we actually go to assemble them. Okay, now we're gonna join the two slabs together. Put these off to the side. I'm gonna take my needle tool and take one side of the short side of the rectangle and scratch it. This is called scoring. So it's got a nice, we're basically opening up the clay to accept new clay. And now I'm grabbing a little bit of water, putting it right in, scratching again. This is breaking the clay, so that way when it goes to stick to the new clay, there's this like muddy, it's called slip, this muddy slip clay that comes to those spaces. So I'm gonna do that on that side, and then I'm gonna do it on the other side. Turn these, and I'm going to stick the two sides together. Compressing them, squishing them together, applying pressure inward towards each other so that way they stick. They look a little messy right now, but that's okay. this is a great opportunity to use your paintbrush to kind of go in that inside seam and smooth it out a little bit. You could also take your rubber rib tool and do the same thing. You kind of go in and pull those joins together, or you can just use your finger. So that way the inside join is nice and smooth. Okay, now I'm gonna do the outside. And whenever you work on the outside of something, it's always nice to brace your hand on the inside, so that way you don't just collapse the whole design in on itself. And I'm taking my rubber rib tool, smoothing out that join, but I'm going at an angle, so I'm going this way and this way, like a little X, so that way it's pulling the clay from one side of the slab all the way to the other side. Okay, so now it's smooth enough on both sides. We'll let it dry before we come in and actually smooth it out fully. But we're gonna take our bottom piece and we're gonna scratch where the cylinder will sit. So if you place it on top, you'll notice that the cylinder sits right on top of the bottom piece. So we're gonna take our needle tool again and we're gonna go all the way around that outside edge. These don't have to look nice, they're just gonna get covered up. Again, it's basically just open the clay to accept the new clay that we're gonna attach to it. And the water is breaking down the clay, because clay is just, you know, fancy dirt. So breaking that down, we're kind of making like a clay glue that's gonna bond these two sides together. And the more you don't want to overdo the water, but make sure that you're doing that slipping and scoring really well. I'm also gonna do that to the base piece. So all the way around the rim, same thing. Just opening up that clay to accept the new clay. Okay, and then we're going to place that on our bottom piece, and I'm kind of tapping the wall so that way it sits on top pretty good. Kind of give it a little tap, and then I'll pick it up. So it's just sitting on top there. The inside is messy. Obviously, it's got all those scratch marks in it. Flip mine over, and then take my thumb and just pull the clay from the side where there's excess onto the side that doesn't have excess. So you're gonna take, for example, right here, there's obviously more clay overlapping the top section, so I'm just gonna pull that down and merge it with the other side. Just gonna go all the way around and make sure that this is nice and smooth. And I'm kind of rotating, so I'm going from pulling some clay from the base onto the cylinder, or from the cylinder onto the base. And this is again gonna compress that join and make sure that the clay sticks to itself really, really well. And it's gonna look really messy at first, and that's okay, because we'll come back in and clean it up once it's hardened up a little bit. I like to take a paintbrush here and get it a little bit wet, not a lot. I kind of wipe the excess off on my fingers or my board. And I'm gonna go right on the inside, and I'm gonna use that to smooth the inside. And I use a paintbrush here because my finger just doesn't have a 90-degree angle, you know? Now that's all smooth on the inside. We're gonna just kind of sit it down and let it rest. I have a fan going over here off to the side, so I'm just gonna kind of set it over here while we work on the lid. Okay, so here's my lid. I'm gonna start by smoothing it out. And then I like to go around and get a little bit of water and kind of make the rim a little nicer so it's not so sharp. Because when it goes through the kiln and that turns into glass, all of these little bumpy, crisp edges are gonna cut you. So I go around and I smooth them out with the edge of my finger, so that way it's not a hazard. I think I've decided that this is the side I want to be the inside, just because it's a little bit more textured than the other side. So So I'm gonna take the rim guide, place it right on the circle, kind of center it a little bit, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm just gonna take my pin tool, and I'm not cutting through, but I'm just really lightly going around the outside edge to make a mark. And then you can take off that piece and that piece to make sure they fit. Okay, now before I attach it, I'm gonna kind of push it down a little bit and then stick it on to make sure that it fits on the inside, which it does. Nothing's catching. So now I'm gonna take my paintbrush and I'm gonna use that to smooth out these cracks. And I'm gonna take a little bit of water on my finger and go around the top edge and just kind of compress downward onto the lid. Taking a little bit of water, I'm just cleaning up the inside cracks. Okay, and then it looks like that. I'm gonna set it off to the side, lay it flat, so it can dry for a little bit before we go and add the flour. But before we add the flour on there, let's smooth it out, just like we did with the lid. This would be a good opportunity to take your sponge and kind of use that to clean up the edges and the cracks where your fingers can't quite meet. You could also use your paintbrush. Okay, now I'm gonna let that sit and dry too. And then I'm gonna take a little paintbrush and use that to smooth out the inside of the circle because my finger doesn't fit in that. Okay, and then you're gonna put your lid on top of your box. See where it fits the best. And then we're gonna place our flour on top and kind of see what angle we like the best. Like, that's kind of fun. That's also kind of fun. That's a little silly. I think I'm just gonna go with this one. So then you're gonna take a little water and get the two attachment points really wet. Place it in the center of your box. And that leaves these little marks, so that way you know where you can scratch the surface. And then you'll do that to the bottom of your flour as well. Grab a little water. A little water on the top. Give it another little scratch. To do this, I'm gonna take the lid off. And I'm gonna put my fingers underneath where the attachment points are, so that way we're not caving in our lid. This is why you want it to dry a little bit too, so it's not so fragile. Okay, and then I'm gonna take my paintbrush. Smooth out those attachment points. But something that helps me determine whether or not something's really well attached is I keep giving it a little wiggle and I push a tiny bit of pressure downward. I don't want to collapse my lid, but I wiggle and push down until the two pieces of clay feel like they're moving together as one piece of clay rather than moving as two separate entities. And then you can also test it by picking it up. Look how cute. A little box. Okay, now I'm just gonna go around and refine everything. So I'm gonna kind of compress and just do some cleanup work. As it dries more and more too, you can clean up the surface a lot once it's not so bendy. Especially the flour, because the flour is very fragile right now, so I'm not gonna mess with it too much. And look, we have a cute little flower box. When you go to dry these, make sure you dry them separately so that way the inside of this doesn't stay too damp, because that will make the base of the lid underneath like warp, or be more likely to warp. So dry them separately. Thanks for making boxes with me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have fun making them. I'm obsessed with them. I think they're so cute and so fun. Please tag me in any pictures if you make them and you post them or anything. Please tag me. I'd love to see what you did, or if you changed them up at all. Obviously these are super customizable, so you can make whatever lid you want, but the general box shape is the same. So